Stress and anxiety, it is a seemingly inevitable and at times and different seasons of our life, a more pervasive part of our lives. I think over the last 18 months, certainly we have each and all felt a bit of that, both personally and professionally. Um, so I am really pleased that you have joined us here today. I'm sitting down with Lori Barr, who is a Denver Rise member. Empathic Communications is her company. She's a coach and consultant, and she is focused on emotional wellness. She's a true expert in really the science behind and understanding what is going on in our bodies and our minds when we're feeling this overwhelm, the stress, the anxiety that we all inevitably feel when we have a full plate, full list of demands, because we're all being pulled in a lot of different directions. So I'm very excited to be sitting down with Lori today. She's going to give us some insights to set on what's going on, and then also some solutions and tips to help get us through these difficult times. Lori, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Kate. Thank you so much for inviting me to have this conversation. It's a pleasure to be here. So
Yes,
again, I have a company called Empathic Communications, and I focus on topics of emotional wellness with organizations and individuals. So that looks like, me going into companies, helping with trainings around these topics. As you can imagine, this year, quite a lot of talk about stress management, about burnout, about really how and why it's so important to take care of our emotional well-being, how that impacts organizations, and obviously how it impacts us individually. And I do coaching work with individuals around the same types of topics as well. I have a history of both working in corporate and working in mental health. I went back and got my master's in counselor education and have been working in the field of mental and emotional wellness for about the last 10 years.
Amazing. I can't imagine anyone better, not only in the Rise community, but probably just generally speaking, to be sitting down and talking with about this topic. So I can personally speak to say that I have felt a lot of stress and anxiety. I'm a working parent. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a human living through what are some really challenging social, political, emotional times for all of us. So this is a topic that certainly I have a personal connection to. And I often find, and as you and I had talked about beforehand, really understanding what these feelings are, what these experiences are, defining it a little bit, and to really understand what's going on in our minds and in our bodies. So talk to me a little bit about what exactly is stress, what is anxiety, and what's happening in my body when I'm feeling them.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I love what you just said as far as, yes, you're a mom, you're an entrepreneur, you're a working professional, and you're human, right? I mean, this is the crux of the matter. We're all human and we all experience stress, anxiety, all of these emotions. So, the reason why I like to define it is because when we can really look at these things more specifically, get a little bit granular with it, it really helps us to both manage it and ideally prevent it if possible. And of course, that's not always possible. But so let's take stress first. So stress is our body's response to an external stimulus, right? So, which is called a stressor. So the stressor is what our body is responding to, and that's that stress response, okay? Anxiety is a little bit different. And again, oftentimes we talk about stress, anxiety interchangeably, but they're actually different. And the difference with anxiety is that it's more internal, right? So it's about our thoughts. So when we're having those moments where we're kind of in that spiral of our thoughts going, rumination, thinking, what if, right? That is more anxiety. And so we can be anxious, and that's more of kind of an acute feeling around that, with those thoughts in our heads. Anxiety is that prolonged piece of anxiety, of anxious thoughts. So it's a prolonged experience. So that's the real difference. Now, again, the responses can be very similar in our body, how it shows up for us in our bodies. And we can talk a little bit more about that. But
Yeah.
I think it's important to have that differentiation in order to
Yeah.
understand how to work with both stress and anxiety.
Yeah, no, I think that's really, really helpful. And as I said, having experienced each of them now, I'm kind of reflecting back. I'm like, okay, what was I experiencing? What am I experiencing in each of those moments? So, I've heard a lot about this term, fight or flight.
Mhm.
How does fight or flight, which is a very primitive, I mean, and very physical experience, talk to me a little bit about what fight or flight is and when we experience it and how it plays into stress and anxiety.
Sure. So the fight, flight, or freeze response is, as you
Okay.
say, a really primitive response, right? So it's actually our fear response, which as
Mhm.
humans, we all have that. And it's actually adaptive and necessary, because what would happen if we didn't have that is if we're driving our car and we all of a sudden we're driving down the street and another car comes at us, we don't even think about it, right? We see it and our body just responds. It's that
Sure.
immediate response, right?
Sure.
So again, it really does keep us alive. Now,
Yeah.
the problem in modern day with that is when it is activated continuously, right? Because
Mhm.
we're built to have it activate and then be done when the stressor is gone, right? So,
Mhm.
for example, with that car example, if you're driving down the street and that car comes, you stop, that event is over, right?
Mhm.
So your body then those hormones can relax and your body can kind of go back to baseline. But if
Mhm.
we have chronic stress, right? Let's say a pandemic, then, people's baseline can be heightened all the time. And the reason
Mhm.
why that can be dangerous is because cortisol is one of those stress hormones. And when cortisol is at a higher level, it can really wreak havoc with our bodies, both physically and emotionally.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, as I say, I've felt it and I've seen it in some of my, as you said, during a pandemic, for example, where
Yeah.
you're not able to really turn it down because it's the environment that we're all living in. But I can even see that even before that maybe you work in a workplace
Mhm.
where the intensity is just turned up, or the expectations that are, whether it's because of sales or leadership or whatever it may be, or maybe it's self-imposed as well too, where you're increasing the expectations or the intensity, and also too life situation, family situations.
Yeah.
I've mentioned certainly becoming a parent. I think some of my levels increased over the past 3 years from there as well. So I can really see how this can play out both in a personal and a professional environment.
Yeah.
How does that impact us? One of the things we talked about, the whole month of September, we're talking about productivity, time management. That's our overall theme. Really used to think about like focus. And again, thinking about both personally and professionally, how our bodies show up and change and impact our ability to be productive, to manage our time and to focus. What happens in that department?
Yeah. So when we're under stress, our bodies are impacted in almost every system, right? So
Yeah.
cognitively, so certainly from a productivity and work perspective, that can have a significant impact because it impacts our ability to concentrate and focus, which
Mm-hmm.
impacts our ability to prioritize, which impacts our ability to also, deal with conflict, and communication. So all of those pieces can really have a profound impact on our professional lives. And
Yeah.
then it also, stress impacts us physically. We all
Yeah.
have, those experiences when we are under stress. And, some people get headaches. Some people have digestive
Mm-hmm.
issues. Just
Ah,
even feeling the rapid heartbeat, right? If
yeah.
you're feeling anxious or stressed, right? So even, physical symptoms of flushing, some people
Mm.
blush when they're feeling anxious or stressed.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
think about that even from a work perspective, Kate, like that can be impactful because that may cause someone to feel really embarrassed or really uncomfortable, so there are all different kinds of ways that this can impact us both professionally and personally.
Let's talk maybe a little bit about prevention. Like is it possible to stop ourselves from getting to the point of I'm in fight or flight mode, I'm flushing, I'm not able to focus and concentrate. I'm in freeze mode, fight, flight. And you said the freeze part, I think, is huge too. I'm not able to even move forward or go from here. Let's talk about prevention a little bit first too, to stop ourselves from getting to that point.
Sure. And so, prevention is always better than intervention, right? It's always easier. It's, again, it stops a lot of potential problems from coming down the road. And again, it's not always possible, right? We are human. We live in a world. There's always going to be stress. And a couple of things I also want to mention is that, stress is not always a negative thing, Kate. Sometimes we need stress to motivate us, right? I mean, if we had no stress in our lives, right, we would probably not do much. So, you've got to be able to have a little bit of stress to push us out of our comfort zones, to help motivate us to do things. But there's kind of this piece of optimal pressure, right? Where the stress is enough to push us to move forward, but not enough to tip us over the edge to where we're moving into that exhaustion and depletion piece. So I, always like to clarify that because I think we often think of it as only a negative, and it's really not. I mean, and again, it's a part of life. So we really do need to ideally know how to prevent, as we're talking about, but also then manage it.
Or optimize. Optimize. Prevent.
Gosh,
optimize is huge. Yeah. All right. Yeah. I'd love to hear more about that.
From a prevention perspective, ultimately you want to have a really good level of self-care, which, as I say self-care, I'm smiling because oftentimes people hear that term and kind of either turn off, or it feels too kind of warm and fuzzy, or, associating with, oh, just take a bath or go to the spa. But it's much more than that, right? So the way that I talk about and teach self-care is, it is those daily practices that we have in our lives that keep us healthy, basically, both physically and emotionally. So ideally, you want to have practices, right, in place to help you prevent and mitigate stress and anxiety, right? Or, stress from getting into that chronic stress space.
Sure. So when you smiled and you talk about, it's like, okay, self-care. It's like, we hear about it all the time. I mean, how does someone really figure out what the best self-care is going to be for them? Because otherwise, I think you're right. We do just default to, I guess I have to go get a pedicure. I don't really like pedicures, but I guess that's what self-care is,
Right.
Do you have any tips for someone to really kind of hone in on what is going to fill them up as opposed to drain them or give them that refill when they really need it?
Yeah, it's really about finding what works for you, right? To speak to that point. So self-care, again, let's define it a little bit further. So it is those daily practices that you do to enhance your health. So part of that are basic needs. So you were talking about sleep, diet. Those are absolutely in that basic needs category. And particularly sleep. If we're not getting enough sleep, that impacts every part of our body as well, all of our systems.
Yeah.
Right. So, and particularly when you have young children, you really live that experience, don't you?
Sure.
So sleep is a huge one. What are you putting into your body? Right. And that speaks to water as well. Are you hydrated? I mean, certainly living in Denver, that's something that we talk about a lot, but it's something that can be easily missed. And really, that has a huge impact on our exhaustion levels, on how we feel physically, so basic needs fall into that category. And then we also have exercise. And again, when people hear the word exercise, often that can be a turnoff. So I'll also put it into the bucket of just movement, how are you
Mhm.
moving your body? That could
Sure.
be just going out for a walk. It could be going for a run. It could be
Mhm.
dancing. It could be
Mhm.
getting up and just like jumping around a little bit to shake things up and to get your,
Sure.
blood pumping through your body. So how are you moving during the day? What kind of breaks are you giving yourself?
Mhm.
This year in particular, I've really worked with people around that idea of slowing down to
Mhm.
actually be more productive and effective, which can be very counterintuitive to people, right?
Mhm. Oh,
So,
absolutely.
yeah, so we think, okay, well, I'm just working and working, I'm getting everything done. I don't have time to slow down, but that's a recipe for burnout, right?
Mm.
So really taking that time, and it doesn't have to be huge chunks of time. It can be a 10
Mhm.
minute break to get outside and just get some
Mhm.
fresh air. It could be, again, if you are a meditator, just closing your eyes and, having a few moments to do some deep breathing work. Also working on, taking a time to pause and tune into your senses. Those are called grounding
Mm.
exercises. What are you hearing?
Oh,
What are you seeing? What are you smelling? All of those
yeah.
pieces can help create a sense of calm and peace just brought in throughout our day.
And so easy. That's so easy to do. As you said, and way less daunting than a meditation, for example.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I've got to get an app and I've got to figure out how to cross my legs in the lotus form and all, it's like, but I love that. Yeah. Just like that awareness and the grounding is usually, it's called a grounding exercise.
Yeah, grounding exercises. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
like that. And yeah, easily implementable. Very neat. Um, something I did want to talk about, that I want to make sure we hit on is, as you said, optimizing and
Mm,
making stress work for us too,
mhm.
because it is really easy to get caught up in the negatives, but I definitely want to make sure that we touch on some of the positives. How can we as humans take some of this, as you said, not anxiety, because anxiety tends to have fewer positives, but some of the stress to really make it work for us a little bit, as opposed to letting it spiral us into more of the negative.
Yeah. So yeah, and that's a great question. And that again, and all of these things that we're talking about, Kate, right, are so again, they're universal, right? We're all going to be experiencing this, but our own unique way of experiencing it and then
Yeah,
dealing with it is different. So we have to really
sure,
explore that and figure out what works for us. So in
sure.
the idea of optimizing the stress, thinking about when you are feeling stress. So number one, what does that feel like for you? How does it show up for you
Okay.
in your body? How do you know that you're experiencing stress? And then how do you take that and run with it, right? So when we're talking about the
Mm.
optimization mode, so that might be, are you most productive in the morning? Are you waking up and being
Mm.
able to say, okay, this is my time I'm going to get the most done that I can, in this first hour of the day, because I know
Yeah.
if I do that, that's going to set me up for the rest of the day, right?
Mhm.
Or maybe that is fitting in exercise in the morning or fitting in meditation in the morning, really figuring out how to take that movement and that kind of energy and put it to work in the best way so that you're not all of a sudden overwhelmed by it. That slowing down is really important. Slow it down, tune into how this is showing up for you and what the signals are. And then
Mhm.
what do you need? What is going to help you manage that? And again, create space in your day. So, for some people, writing things down is really helpful. I'm going to write down a list and be able to cross that off. And that is, again, that's that action. That's that agency. Like I can do that. I can, cross off my list and that's going to feel really good and really empowering. Um,
Yeah.
and other people will have other tactics that might work for them. Maybe it's time blocking during the day to like, okay, this is
Sure.
going to be when I am focusing on exercise. This is going to be when I'm focusing on all my administrative work, right? Whatever that
Sure.
might look like.
Interesting. Yeah. How about utilizing other people as well? So whether that's, maybe talking to somebody else, whether it's your manager, whether it's your partner, whether it's a friend. Is that sometimes I find, maybe this is me laying down on the therapist couch too much. Sometimes I find that I will turn to someone and I think that talking out my stresses and my problems will help. And yet somehow by the end of the conversation, now I have like 27 more things. And now I'm even more worked up because someone has worked me up even more. Or even here now, again, not to open up my personal life too much, but listen, my husband, for example, different personality types. Sometimes I just want to vent about my stresses or anxieties, and then he has a solution for all of them in 37 seconds. He doesn't know the whole deep, long story. All of a sudden, he has all the solutions to my problems. And I'm feeling more frustrated than ever about that too, being like, I kind of just wanted to talk about it. And so is that sort of more of like and just have you listen, and so it makes me think about perhaps is having that in mind, perhaps leaning into not individuals, but just a practice of venting and finding someone to listen. Perhaps that's not as effective, and perhaps maybe finding a different tactic would be good. Or what are your thoughts on sort of that venting tactic?
Sure. And it's a great point. So thank you for bringing up the connection piece, because we are wired for connection, right? So yes, I mean, oftentimes when we are feeling stressed, anxious, really going to someone and either asking for help or just being able to have that safe space to be able to talk is incredibly helpful. And to your point about venting, so there's actually been research around that, is venting really helpful?
Sure.
And the answer is yes and no, right? Yeah. So to a certain extent, right, to be able to kind of get out what's really bothering you is helpful. What's not helpful is if it becomes a conversation where, as you just said, that person, they are on your side, and not only are they on your side, but they are just, heating it up, right? So,
right.
Yeah, where they're kind of getting on board and, really going there with you. That's not helpful, right? So what can be the most helpful is, again, having that sounding board, right? Having someone who's a great listener, who's able to really help you feel seen, heard, and understood, kind of that empathy piece. And then sometimes if they're able to help you reframe or do a little bit of problem solving, that can be most helpful. But to the point that you mentioned around your husband, kind of going to that fix it very quickly, that also is not helpful, right? Because if you just want to vent and he's jumping in to try to fix it right away, that you're not being able to get those emotions out, right? You're not being able to share what's happening. So certainly in partnerships, what can be really helpful is, well, really in all relationships, is to be able to say, for you, Kate, to say, hey, I am feeling, I've got a lot of stress going on right now. And I would really love to just be able to share with you and kind of get out what's going on with me. And I'd love for you to be able to just listen at first, or as we start the conversation, you could just be a sounding board and just listen to me right now. So to be able to state our needs can really be helpful.
Well, something I do want to make sure, because I also want to be conscious of time, because I feel like I could literally talk to you about this all day. But really, sometimes we just get there. We get to where we are overwhelmed, we are burnt out. We get to that freeze point or the flight where it's like, I'm out of here. Yeah. So whether it's that I just need to give up, we're throwing our hands up, we're having an anxiety attack, we're crying, whatever it may look like, however it may show up for us. And I can say, as taking this from a work standpoint, if I've got someone on my team that is feeling that way, that's a huge problem for me, because they may just not have the tools and the skills to be able to get out of that stressed place. And I might accidentally, we might end up losing a really great employee who is just stressed, but they're getting into the flight or freeze place. So also I think about this from a leadership standpoint
Yeah.
of how, which so many of our Rise members are, they've got team members who work for them. How can we support ourselves, but also support people at work when they're feeling these really intense feelings and emotions? How can we help each other as well, and help our teams get through these times when we've hit that point?
Yeah. So that's such a great and important question, Kate. So the first piece is taking care of yourself, right? Making sure that you are in a good space, because if you're not, number one, you may not even be able to be aware enough to tune into what your staff is experiencing. So you've got to be taking care of yourself and have that level of self-awareness, right? So that's the first piece. The second piece, and again, so critical right now, and it's wonderful because so many organizations are realizing this, that you have to really take emotional wellness seriously, because it does impact everything, at work. It really does.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when you're noticing that a staff member is experiencing a lot of stress or anxiety, being able to have that conversation. So part of that is creating the psychological safety and space that people feel that it's okay to say to you, hey, Kate, you know what, I'm really struggling today. And I'm not quite sure what I need, because oftentimes people don't know what they need, right?
Sure.
I'm not quite sure what I need, but can we talk about this? So for you as a leader to say, hey, Kate, I'm noticing that, I don't know if you're experiencing some stress right now, but I'm noticing that you seem like you might be. Would you want to talk about that a little bit? And, that opens the door to say, hey, and that gives that person the opportunity to say, hey, no, I'm actually okay. Or, yes, I have so much on my plate right now. I don't know what to do. I'm overwhelmed. So, that's the first piece, is creating a sense of safety, opening that door to communicate, right? And then really listening to what's going on with that person. It might be that someone's really okay, they just need to get it out and express what's going on. It may mean that they need some help setting some boundaries, right? We didn't talk about boundaries, and boundaries are really important when we're talking about this topic. It may be that their workload's too heavy, right? I mean, there could be a number of different things going on. Maybe they've got a lot going on in their personal life, right? And, right now, the separation of personal and professional is extremely yes. So all of those pieces, we can't ignore them at work. We can't. They're present. So really being able to hone in on that is important.
Yeah. No, and it makes me think too. Yeah, it's like by creating a norm to say it's okay to talk about what's going on, and as the leader setting that example too. Maybe should share with your team as well, like, hey, this is what's going on in my life at home, and demonstrating and create. Is that or would that be a tactic perhaps in creating a place of psychological safety, or at least a culture of sharing?
Absolutely. So psychological safety, again, is kind of a topic unto itself, and how you create that. And part of creating that, yes, as the leader, you're setting the stage, right? So you are the model, you're creating that forum. So yes, for you to be able to show some vulnerability is, again, that opens the door for others. And, right, you also need to have boundaries, right? So it's a real balance. But yeah, I mean, by being able to say, oh my gosh, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed this morning, here's what's going on. And just even opening that door. So let's have that space to be able to share what people are experiencing. And even, for a leader to say, let's start this morning by going around and saying a word or two about how you're doing, and I'll start. You kind of start that sharing piece can be helpful.
Something that, and I'm not sure where we'll go with this, but sometimes I think, though, speaking from personal experience, but from this leadership standpoint, I'm thinking about being from the outside. I sometimes find myself where I'll get so worked up and so overwhelmed and so stressed. It's like, again, that place of flight or freeze. It's like, I can't do this anymore. And my only response is to fight or freeze.
Mm-hmm.
And I could see myself coming to, I know I have gone to my business partner, Stacy, or previous managers and bosses, and like, I just can't. And actually, it's not that I couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
I was just too worked up at the
Yep.
time. I had worked myself up into a tizzy, or I had had too many conversations with someone else who had built me up to, and I just gotten to this edge.
Yep.
And the only place I could find was to jump off.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's being the person who's standing on the edge,
Mm-hmm.
how do we back off and climb down the ladder, and or as a loved one or a leader, how do we help support someone in backing off the ledge a little bit? Because that's a really extreme place to be and to feel. And it's really easy to feel helpless for how do I support someone who is on the edge right now?
Yeah. And so, one of the big pieces of that is, again, giving someone, acknowledging someone and noticing, right? Acknowledging and noticing, hey, Kate, I'm noticing that you are experiencing a lot of stress right now, or, that are you feeling really anxious right now? Do you want to talk about that, right? Kind of that acknowledgement, that opening the door. Yeah. And also it might be, do you want some space right now? Do you want me to kind of come back in about 10 minutes where we can talk about this, or, really just that acknowledgement, providing that space and providing that, space for someone to be able to tell you exactly what they're feeling. So oftentimes when we're in that space, it's that buildup, right? It's like that pressure cooker. Right. So you're going to explode at some point. So for you to be able to notice, okay, it's coming up to here, it's coming up to here, it's coming up to here. Okay, what do I need to do? So that's from your perspective, individual perspective. What do I need to do to kind of lower that? And that is often, again, taking a break, taking a step back. What do you need? Yeah. And then if you're supporting someone in that space, another big piece of that is not being judgmental about it.
Sure.
And that, again, sounds pretty basic, but we can often kind of go there like, why are you so stressed? Right? That's a very different response than, hey, I'm noticing that, you're not doing great right now, or I'm noticing that there might be something going on with you right now. That's very different than, why are you stressed? Or what's wrong? Yeah. What's wrong with you?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love that. Okay. No, and I can see how, as I say, being on both sides of a situation like that. As I noted, I could talk to you about this all day and listen to and pick your brain and come up with scenarios and come up with all that. But I don't want to I've taken so much of your time already, and I'm grateful for everybody who has tuned in and watched this. The other thing that I know about you, Lori, is that you love to continue these conversations and have these conversations with others. And so I'll provide all of your contact information on this page where people can reach out to you and connect with you directly, whether that's through Rise Digital or on your website, or reach out to you through Empathic Communications. You are a wealth of knowledge. I'm feeling in a better place too, as well. I've got lots of, I feel like, next steps for myself, as well as things that I'm thinking about doing for my team. So thank you very, very much, Lori.
Oh, thanks, Kate, so much. And I hope it was helpful. I feel like, I kind of like go here, there, and everywhere in these conversations.
Oh, that's me too. Yes. Well, it's because it's not a straightforward topic. It's not an easy thing. We're complicated as humans. So
we sure are. And I want to recommend a couple of books quickly because, and let me see what I have. Okay. Burnout is a really great book, talking about stress and the stress cycle. So they do a really good job of talking about the science behind it in a really accessible way. So I highly recommend this book. And then the other one, is Unwinding Anxiety. So he does a great job as well, talking about, some great tools to help manage anxiety and also understand how anxiety manifests. So those are my two helpful book recommendations for today.
I love that. I will include links to those as well. I love a good book and a resource, and hopefully they're on Audible, because I can't get
Yes,
through a book if I'm not.
that's right. That's right. Burnout would be a great one on Audible, actually.
Oh, good. Awesome. Well, thank you, Lori, so much. I hope this was as valuable of a conversation for our viewers as it was for me. And I look forward to all of you all continuing this conversation on Rise Digital and through building relationships and connections through Rise. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Kate.